Welcome everyone to our weekly call. Recording is now enabled. Thanks everyone for joining. Let me share my screen just to give you a quick heads up what we're going to cover this week. So first up, we're going to continue the discussion that some of us started and most recently were involved with at IETF 115 in the ECH Deployment Considerations side meeting. So we'll continue that discussion, which Arnaud is going to lead on, and then time permitting, I will share some thoughts on interesting agenda items at the forthcoming Internet Governance Forum 22 event, which takes place at the end of this month, so in a couple of weeks' time, in Ethiopia or online. And then, as always, just quickly rattle through a few recent developments from the headlines and some forthcoming events and future call topics, and anything else anyone wants to talk about within our allotted hour, if there is any time left at the end. So we'll see how we get on. But first things first, so let me stop sharing. Let's kick off then with an ECH focused discussion. So I'll hand over to Arnaud to kick that off, and then we'll see where the discussion takes us. And if we're getting close to the hour, I might interject just to give us a few minutes at the end. But Arnaud, over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Let me find, I think this is this one. Do you guys see my PowerPoint?
Yep, yeah, it's not.
All right.
Yeah, that's perfect.
All right. So, hi everyone. My name is Arnaud Taddei. I work at Broadcom. And so we had the chance to have quite of a journey for IETF 115, and then during IETF 115, so I thought I started to capture elements for a debrief. So this is work in progress. So if you see anything that needs to be changed or amended, please let me know. So first, before IETF 115, just to recap for those who were not there since 6 months, in Vienna, in IETF 113, Andrew, Paul Vixie, and David Wright created an ECH Deployment Considerations draft. It was produced to share concern on ECH deployments based on the Monday meeting. That's what we have, and other roundtables. It was presented as a dispatch and was severely critiqued. Then, seeing no momentum, Simon and I in Broadcom decided to keep that momentum, or do our best to keep that momentum. So we created another draft, which was more focused on enterprise issues. We presented as a hot RFC and an informal side meeting, and we received good feedback from people who participated, and these helped us create a to-do list that we executed. In parallel, during summer, after IETF 114, there was a workshop about encrypted networks at the IAB. This workshop happened with a lot of things to digest that have not been digested, that have not been minuted, that have not been verbalized. So you got access to the videos. We had a very, very expeditive session during IETF 115. Anyway, it happened. We were made aware too late that we could have participated. But as well, the IAB released 2 important documents to read. One is on privacy partitioning, and one is on data minimization principle. So quite a lot of things happened over the past 6 months. Then what happened on our side is from a subset of people in this group plus others, we formed a very informal ad hoc group of 30 people, and our goal was to do what we couldn't do in IETF 114, which was to merge the above 2 intended drafts. So we We generated a version 3, so we decided to complete and progress the work that Andrew, Paul, and David started. We learned a lot. It had been an approximative daily sprint from Google Docs to a private GitHub. We are still learning. There is still a lot in the process. And at the end, Andrew and I, while in IETF 115, the day the submission reopened, we acted as editors and we merged all the mass of 4 main Express views from people, and we generated the version 03. So our strategy was, one, to keep the documents on the deployment issues. So we had to make sure that we would not expand the scope. So it was really a big scoping exercise. So we cut a lot of things. We tried to simplify the text. We added as well some other views from the public network operators that was not there, thank you to Gianpaolo. But our tactics was to avoid presenting the TLS working group. And we didn't want either that people get the intention we are trying here to stop ECH. So we tried to stay on the problem. We try to present to SEC dispatch, but there is a rule that says that if a draft has been presented once in SEC dispatch, it cannot come back, which I can understand. So we could not go there, but we obtained a hot RFC, item 6, and a formal side meeting, which got agreement to be recorded. So we have the agreement. So after we finished the version 3, Andrew and I sat and we agreed the principle of implementation that Andrew prepared. And in particular, we kept the potential contentious to-do list in section 9 of our work. So then, exec summary of the side meeting. After a significant initial tension, we could step through our concerns. We received a lot of feedback that we need to triage. Our main objective was reached, that we could be heard. And to some degree, some gave constructive ideas, but it could have been much worse. So the room atmosphere, the room was packed. We had approximately 50 people, I think. I think roughly 20 supporters and 30 ECH proponents, so nearly all the key proponents. I think the only one I could not see was Stephen Farrell. The tension was very high, especially in the beginning. So as an anecdote, when we presented the blue sheets for getting people's email, the 4 first person refused to put their name. So just to give you the how it was. The video and audio systems were not optimal, so the replay is not fantastic to watch. The audio is better, actually, but in the room that was not always easy to listen to people. So the key discussions happen, in fact, on our section 9. So glad that Andrew put the section 9 on the screen, because this is where people add most of the comments. So these were the key elements of discussion. So is ECH, if ECH is enforced, what are the solutions to all the above problems? So for schools, for education, for public network, for enterprise, and what are the migration paths? We had the endpoint problem that we explained, and we explained that the endpoint components cannot be judge and party. This one as well got a lot of debates. We had quite of a discussion here because the other party wanted to tell us, educate us on the fact that security should be on the endpoint, which we dream it could be, but that's a dream. There are need for further clarification on the ECH draft. This one was pushed back heavily by Eric and others. There is the point on the DNS was not too much mentioned, neither the client-facing server controlled by malicious actors. There were discussion on a number of other topics. We see here consolidation considerations and so on. So here I tried, and this is really an attempt, I tried to put some express views. There were people who think that the list we proposed in this draft was particularly negative. And they would like to show as well, and they critique that we were showing only one side for ECH deployment. So they request as well to add the benefits of SNI, which we noted. The SNI, several people said that this was unreliable and should not have been used in the first place. So this is to research further. The relationship between the client-facing server and backend servers are clear for them. And if not clear, we should contribute to make it better, which is a fair point. Where do you want this document to go and why not TLS group? So this was a strong push by a few people, in particular Roman, which I pushed back. The current document topics are enterprise deployment consideration, which is a specific instance of the general problem of managed private networks, understood that non-edge or non-private or non-managed networks will have different considerations. So there was quite a discussion on the concept of subcontext, because I had the chance to discuss that with Kenji Bao for a long time before. And then here are some others. If there are deployment considerations missing, we ought to enumerate them in the next draft. Well, in fact, we have enumerated them, so maybe people had no time to read the draft, but I thought we did a good job at that. Is it just the SNI or is it the LPN? So this is a good question. I will need to research if the LPN needs to be considered. It will be a great contribution to enumerate all the types of middle boxes that are reliant on the SNI and ALPN. Why not? The solution is on endpoint security. Definitely not. Visibility is the worst possible way to secure a network, but it's our last line and there are choices. So I'm sure I forgot other points, but this is what I captured so far, because I need to rehear the replay to put all the express views. So there is a dark matter behind all of that. So beyond the side meeting, there were many other discussions in the IETF 115, and I found some dark matter in, for example, the presentation that happened in AAB Open on that following line. Many newer groups in the IETF are working on improving user privacy by separating data between entities. And this is why they see a link between these four elements: OHI, PPM, mask, and privacy path. So that means that ECH in itself is just the top of the iceberg. There are many other gravitation forces that are trying to get to a certain place, for good or for bad. So a much bigger concern, and that's personal. For some at IETF, IAB, and IRTF, the stake of ethics is so high that it requires a sacrifice of security. The infrastructure level should not be performing security measures. They don't want to see it at network lower level. It should all be done at layer 9, so the CDNs, and they can be trusted. For others, there is a high risk of centralization and point of control. Even if ECH is happening, it will be breached and people will be trumped. Will human rights be liable for that? Why shall we trust more the CDNs versus others? A really complicated design of intermediaries that seem to create new middle boxes. The proposed work program on IETF 116, this is what we started to put together. So core elements of work. So first I have to fix an issue on as producer version 04. I put a pull request number 8, which is in progress. In fact, I did it. It has been approved. This was a mistake I did on non-transporting something from Google Docs to GitHub. We need to consolidate and homogenize the list of all express views plus the existing to-do. So there is quite some canonicalization work to be done on everything. And then once we have them in clear, then consider all the express views and agree what to implement in version 05. So there are things we can accept from the feedback we get, some that is just there, but people didn't have time to read it. I think this is why they propose these things. We will have as well to make sure that we follow better what is going on the TLS group, on SecDispatch, on IAB, and on DNRG. So DNRG is this group in IRTF, which is on the opposite side, is trying to understand the centralization issues. And in parallel, study the feasibility of an alternative complement on SNI. So we need to really spend time understand IAB documents like the privacy partitioning or the data minimization, and give more formal feedback there. There is as well some organizational aspects. So there is a clear question to adopt GitHub. move from Google Docs to GitHub, move to a public GitHub, fix the problem of -latest versus -OX versioning. So this is something we found at the last minute. It's a tactical issue in the Markdown and so on. So Roloff in Broadcom volunteered to give us a training. So I will check with him when we can make this happen. As well, the daily sprint has been really draining with no preparation and so on. So we want to move to a weekly, bi-weekly cadence until approaching IETF 116, where we will probably be back on daily cadence. But by that time, we will have more maturity. There is quite a number of groups and individuals who are showing interest. So we might even have more people willing to participate. And when time approaches, organize the details for IETF 116, so hot RFC, side meeting, or working group. And that's it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Arnaud. So that's a very rapid sort of run through of sort of 6 months worth of event. So necessarily summarized. Otherwise, we'd need a far longer meeting. Hopefully that gave people a sense of how we got to here. And clearly some of you on this call would have been involved in getting to here, as it were. So very much appreciate your input. And I guess the purpose of putting the slot on the call was partly to share that, because clearly not everyone could be at the IETF meeting, for example. But really give an opportunity then for others to sort of join the conversation, say whether you think there's anything significant omitted or overlooked, but equally get a sense of if people that thus far haven't been involved in some of the discussion specifically on ECH but would like to be in the future, then again, now's an opportunity to say so, and we can obviously organise the specifics outside of this meeting, because we don't need to do it on this call. We can arrange some separate sessions where appropriate. So Arnaud, I don't know if you want to unshare your screen, just give people a chance to chime in. Thanks. So does anyone have any sort of point of view on what was covered, anything that you think was overlooked, and anyone that perhaps hasn't been so directly involved in helping get to the latest sort of draft of the document that we referred to, that would like to be involved in the future? Now's a good chance to just sort of indicate any of that. So I either use the Zoom tool to sort of raise your virtual hand or put something in the chat as you see fit. We can take a sort of few minutes now and obviously then sort of take the discussion offline as appropriate. But anyone got anything you want to say to any of that? And I'll stop talking, give you a chance to do so.
Non. Alors, en fait, on a eu des discussions à l'intervenir, on a même fait intervenir.
I'm not seeing any hands raised, but I can see Dan has put in the chat. I'd like to see more analysis and comparison of solutions to the problem. Yeah, noted. Okay, we can add that to the potential to-do list. I can see a hand raised from Emily. Yeah, Emily, do you want to unmute and just chime in?
Thank you very much, Arnaud, and thanks, Andrew, for giving me the floor. Yeah, really great presentation, and not coming from a technical background, you know, a lot of it was, yeah, not in my comfort zone, but I was just really interested if you mentioned the sort of the tensions in the room, and I wondered if you could just give a bit more color around that and a sense of, you know, how you see those tensions being lifted and a slightly less polarized position emerging compared to what you've highlighted in your summary as the, you know, the different positions of the parties? Thank you.
Okay, great question, thanks.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Emily. And since we met last time in another world, it was a world of Stranger Things in Bucharest and ITU, but it's another story. Thank you for your question. So I think there are multiple ways to answer that. So first, about the tensions themselves. The tension was such that at the beginning, we realized that some people were tasked to attack. Exactly what happened in IETF 113 6 months ago. Sort of my interpretation is that we were lucky, really lucky, because Paul Vixie was there. And Paul actually showed, he opened his video. He was not with video off. And what I realized from Andrew, that was the first time it seemed that Paul joined IETF in 3 years. So in fact, some people tried to attack on the basis that, for example, in Africa, it's really important that ECH is there because people are dying because of some bad countries, which we understand. And so they are pushing, is what I said, by the stake of ethics is so high that they really want to force it to happen. And because as well, there were some business interests, and Paul had to stop that. I think one of the reasons why the proponents of ECH had a problem is that Paul put a big stick in the ground from the beginning. Said, no, either one side wins or the other side wins. It's not like a win-win at this stage. And so they try to say, yes, but this is about URIs. And so I said, no, it's about SNI is not about a URI. So anyway, I think Paul, from a pure mechanics of the attention, he blocked the aggression. Because otherwise we realized from other discussions, because some people told us we were here to charge. And this didn't happen. So there were some robust discussion, there were some pushes, some pushback, but I think people started to listen and they started to recognize that there are some problems. And they, of course, try the tactics of getting us trapped into a TLS working group, for example, and so on. And I said, no, because the group of these ad hoc people are tourists, and I'm not pejorative, it's just the way that the IETF people call us. We are, until you've passed 5 years in IETF, you are called a tourist. I hate it, but this is how they call us. So I said, no, I'm not going to send a group that was started by 3 veterans, Andrew, David, and Paul. Then Simon is new in my team on that. I don't think I'm not a veteran at all. I still consider myself a tourist. And then we started to incorporate other people who had not a single clue what even IETF is. So imagine going to the TLS working group with people who are writing the TLS stack for their companies, for their browsers, and so on. It's just, it's going to be just a massacre, right? So let's go step by step. Let's mature. I think we are learning. And as well, the real question for us will be what we want to do with it. Do we want to have an independent track, or do we want to go at some point in the TLS working group? So the question is open, but maybe it's my interpretation. I think we were really straight in our shoes with Andrew, and that was what helped us to actually make this, let's say, more respectful discussion. So that's one thing. The other thing is about the depth of the debate is the issue with the ethics point of view on that is that my own philosophy is very simple. Each time humankind invented something on this planet, it can be used for good and for bad. Why would it be different for ECH? How can you have the arrogancy in our world that each time we invent something, this is to drive a law? Really, seriously. It's just not in my genes, in my philosophy. I just can't buy that at all. So will ECH be breached? Yes. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. When it will happen, will the human rights people claim that this time it was Cloudflare that screwed or something like this? I'm really curious.
Thank you
Over
so
to you.
much. Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you.
I can see David has put in the chat to so yeah, maybe part of the ongoing decades-long the debate between privacy and security, but a slightly different sort of take on that. And also, from my recollection of the meeting, I know Tommy Jensen, who put it in the chat, was keen to have some input into the TLS working group. I think in particular, Tommy, into the GitHub if there are issues in the draft, in the ECH draft that were being sort of covered in the document that we were presenting on that needed to be carried across into the ECH draft, which I think was a very valid point to make, something we hadn't really given a lot of consideration to before the meeting, in all fairness. So that was helpful to raise that. And then finally, since Arnaud mentioned Paul Vixie, I've put a link in the chat to Paul's most recent keynote at Nanog 86, which was 3 or 4 weeks ago now, which people may find of interest. And finally, I think Simon had raised his virtual hand via the chat. So Simon, did you want to come off mute to say something?
Just a quick question, please, Anna. Do we not see here an example of a sort of a generic problem that IETF can't react very well in organisational terms to things that sit across different groups and bring in some element of outside user-oriented opinion, and sort of it's constituted very much around almost fixed technological concepts that suit the provider side, but doesn't really work too well if you're trying to look at it from another perspective?
Perhaps a short, slightly facetious that might be yes, but that's not very illuminating. I mean, for what it's worth, and I've been accused of over referring to this, but I'll refer to it nevertheless. The IAB Internet Architecture Board issued a very useful document a couple of years ago, RFC 8890, one of the few RFCs I remember the number of. The Internet is for end users, which sort of touched on the challenges of bringing end user perspectives into the arena of the IETF, especially where there are clearly conflicting end user interests, and how to resolve those conflicts, principally by engaging with the wider multi-stakeholder community, and I think that's a path that needs to be explored generally, not specifically to this issue. I think one scenario which I think might be the right approach for this particular document, i.e. the sort of the end user perspectives on ECH, sort of the deployment considerations, may well be, if it doesn't sit well with the sort of TLS working group, which it may well not do, as it's not a design sort of document per se, would be to go down the independent submissions route for the deployment considerations aspects, whilst sort of streaming out any specific design issues into the GitHub for the ECH document itself. And that may be the right destination, but others may have different views on that, particularly those of you that are more sort of well versed in the sort of various IETF procedures. So by all means, come in on that as you see fit. Arnaud, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, so in fact, just in terms of paradoxes, another paradox, for example, is if you look at the working group I2NSF, which is about security capabilities you put in network security functions for 5G networks, for example. it's funny because they mention all what the other groups hate. So he speaks about security capabilities like proxies and firewalls and network security. So you have one group of IETF going one thing and the other one going to another direction. So we have an issue here. Another thing that was quite unfair is that the draft, the ECH draft, considers the defenders on network security like attackers. So when during the side meeting, when the other party requested to have a more balanced ECH deployment draft, someone said maybe they could do the same on their own draft to rebalance what is, frankly speaking, quite humiliating for the hundreds of thousands of people who are doing everyday security to protect people, whether they are citizens or schools or enterprise people. I think this is not fair either. I didn't want to put oil on the fire during the side meeting, but if we were fair, I mean, it has to be symmetric.
Yeah. So I don't know if that sort of helps, Simon, in a way. It's not, I'm not sure there is a direct answer to the question, other than it's complicated, and particularly given the organizational nature of the IETF, being a community, not an organization in the sort of normal sense of the word, that does mean that there are inconsistencies in approach, just because different parts of the community take different views on things, and that's life.
Yeah. It's complicated for any SDO. I just think it's particularly complicated for IETF because it's more set in its ways in one sense. I mean, I know perhaps that's not something that one could say really, but it's more defined than a lot of other SDOs are in terms of sort of how it's set up, and its apparent flexibility is not actually as flexible as it seems when you first look at the words, I don't think. But
yeah,
it's an ongoing issue that we need to.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, Arnaud.
Yeah, actually, there is one way that we could look at that differently, which is one point that is never explained anyway. And I could see the email from Vittorio on the partitioning problem on the IAB that Martin Thompson answered, is design. We never codify design. So we never say, okay, what are you trying to achieve in terms of design characteristics? We never express that. If you want to move to a model where you have hyper-centralization, this will go against resiliency. If you want to have something that is trying to move to something new, yes, but today we can't, this is going against migratability. So if we were trying to put the criteria of design, we could have a referential on which we could have some more stability and compare solution A versus solution B versus solution C. And we could ask ourselves the right questions about what are we trying to achieve here. So, of course, each of these characteristics conflict with each other. And not only that, we need to aggregate them, which surprisingly, I could see Daniel Gilmore mentioning, are we going to make an aggregation when they had the problem on the TLS working group on the Condorcet, for example, choice operator. There are other operators we could use mathematically to do that. But we are not even in the starting block to do that, because we in IT, we forget that there are others in other worlds like civil engineering that have been through all of that for decades, for centuries, maybe for millennium. And we believe that just because we manage information, we can abstract ourselves from good design practices. No, and maybe this is why we fail.
Well, any of us here, of course, are professionally trained engineers, so we're well aware that there are design principles and practices that apply to electronics and telecoms and communications and so on. I mean, ostensibly, when you ask the question, you get it's the Internet Architecture Board. I personally, not government policy, would question that. Is the IAB actually doing architecture? Not really, as I would know it, but anyway, that's an ongoing question, isn't it?
Indeed. Okay, let's just see. Does anyone else have Anything else you want to sort of chip in with, or anyone perhaps that was in the side meeting or other involvement that thinks anything significant that has been overlooked or should be thought about? And finally, anyone that isn't already involved in further iterations of the sort of deployment considerations document that wants to be, but by all means, well, either you can indicate now, put something in the chat, or reach out to Arnaud or I offline if that is easier. So last chance to chip in on this. Not seeing anything else in the chat at the moment, or hands raised. Nope. In which case, let's finish there then and say, please sort of pick up the discussion separately if you wish to. I expect to see the deployment considerations document evolve. As Arnaud said, version 04 will be done as a sort of an administrative step, just to correct a sort of minor piece of text. So the main focus will be on a sort of version 5 to have ready so at or around the next meeting in second half of March in Japan. And I suspect, Arnaud, we're trying to do it so that it's available before the sort of Monday at the start of the meeting, just for our collective sanity. That might be a bit better this time round. Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you for that, Arnaud. That was sort of helpful to sort of bring things sort of up to date for everyone. Right, let me just go back to sharing my screen for a moment. I promised that I would just give you a quick heads up of a few sessions that are coming up at the Internet Governance Forum that's due to start in just over a week, either sort of virtually or in person in Addis Ababa, if you happen to be traveling there. I have to say that the IGF event is one of the few events that makes the agenda for IETF meetings look unambitious and very streamlined in comparison, as it typically features anything up to, I think this time I counted 11 parallel 12 on one day. So there's a lot of content on a wide range of topics. What I've done on this slide is just to pull out some things that caught my eye. So this is a highly unscientific sort of take on some of the highlights from across the 5 days. So the day 0, as the Monday is referred to, through to the last day, which is the Friday. I won't sort of read through all of these because it would take too long, but what I would ask, anyone that's got an interest or any questions, please put them in the chat and I'll answer Thomas' question in a second. Equally, anyone that has looked in more depth than I have at the agenda and thinks there's anything really interesting or significant that I've overlooked, again, please put it in the chat or just sort of unmute and shout it out, and I'll update this to share afterwards with any additions as appropriate. Answering Tommy's question, I think MS in this context is multi-stakeholder rather than Microsoft, so good spot on that one. Yeah, not to be confused with Microsoft, although no doubt some of your colleagues may well be there, Tommy. So that's the session, if you can see it, on the Wednesday at 06:30 UTC, and workshop number 46, strengthening multi-stakeholder collaboration on DNS.
I would note, Andrew, that MS in this sort of context is quite often used for member states. Could be that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, fair enough. Could equally be member states. I took it as multi-stakeholder, but yeah, both of those would be valid, but definitely not Microsoft in this case. Although I'm sure Microsoft's input will be very, very welcome in the discussion. I'll add in any that I've overlooked that Emily has an involvement with. So by all means, let me know those, Emily. Either put them in the chat or let me know afterwards. I can see you put some more there. So yeah, I'll add those in. And equally, anyone else that is involved, I suspect Vittorio, you will be attending either in person or remotely. So may have picked up on a few things that I've not yet done so from the from the agenda. So again, if that's the case, by all means, let me know. I'll pop Emily's in an updated version of the table to share after this call. Anyone else got anything you want to add, or any other questions on things which aren't immediately obvious that you want to call out? As I say, just unmute and shout out if you wish to. I'm sure Peter's noted with interest there's I think at least one, probably several DNS abuse related topics. So as the first ambassador, you'll no doubt be wanting to attend all of them.
Yeah, actually, the DNS abuse thing is, I am definitely going to be attending online. So yeah, thank you for this, by the way, Andrew. It's super helpful. The schedule is quite daunting.
Yes, I must admit, I needed a coffee to go through it. It's it's plenty of choice of sessions. I think is the least to say. Just by the by, Peter, I've always wanted to ask, as the first ambassador on DNS abuse, do you get those chocolates that ambassadors get? I'll be sharing those with us for Christmas.
The Ferrero Rochers, right?
Yeah, that was it. I couldn't think of the name of the company. Ferrero Rocher.
I know. The role title does make me slightly uncomfortable, but it's really just the kind of promoting the work that First does. So yeah.
A lifetime supply of chocolate would seem like the least that you should get for doing that.
Yeah, but nobody beats me, because at ITU Plenipotentiary, I brought something like 5 kilos of Swiss chocolate for my delegation.
Oh, wow.
Just to make sure that we would make sure everybody would be comfortable in the long hours of negotiation.
I have to say that those of us that were at
Were they Ferrero Rocher?
well, yeah, they would have been good as well. But for those of us that were in the ECH side meeting, Arnaud, the Swiss chocolate was notable by its absence. I think if you make it to Japan, you've set a really high bar in terms of expectation.
Yeah, it's okay. Challenge is taken. No problem.
Fantastic. We have several hundred people will be attending our side meeting just to get the chocolate. Brilliant. Okay, well, look, I'll update this with those that Emily's put in the chat. If anyone else has got anything else you think needs to be added, just drop me a line. I'll add them in as well, and then share that with people. I'll put links to the relevant sessions, because again, because it's so dense, it takes a while to navigate through to them if you actually want to attend. And final comment on this. IGF is free to attend remotely, so if you just want to dip into 2 or 3 of these, if it works for your time zone, it only costs you your time. There's no fee to do so. Yeah, from that point of view, it's well worth doing if you can. Right, let me move on. Just keeping an eye on the time. Again, I won't go through all of these. You've had those of you that on the mailing list would have had these, plus a few others in your inbox. But just briefly, you may have seen that Apple has revamped the iCloud.com website. So if you want to control settings for things like private relay, the user interface has been revamped slightly for that. there was an interesting report on CISO Online about the slow adoption of DNS security measures by enterprises, which is leaving firms more vulnerable than they need. DNSSEC being an example, but there were others. It's worth taking a look at the if you have the time and inclination. The IAB is considering adopting a draft on privacy partitioning, which was mentioned briefly earlier. So there's a link to the actual draft in question if you have an interest in that. There's also, if you look at the IAB's, the relevant mailing list, the architecture discuss mailing list, that's where there was an exchange of views, a brief exchange of views on this topic as well, within the last couple of weeks, I think. Final two things. Firstly, hot on the heels of the Digital Markets Act entering into force on the 1st of November, the Digital Services Act has now entered into force within the European Union. So that'll be relevant to many of the people on this call, given your day jobs. And finally, if you want a nice, easy read, you'll see that the China's social credit system has been opened up to public consultation by the Chinese government. So I'll confess I've not looked at that at all, but the mere fact they've opened it up to public consultation, I think is just fascinating. So those of you that perhaps focus more on the policy side might be tempted to maybe spend some time over Christmas. Don't bother with the family; it's overrated. You can spend time doing a public consultation on the social credit system. But yes, to Kurt's point in the chat, possibly not if you're a Chinese citizen, unless you're going to say it's marvelous. If you're actually going to critique it, maybe best for non-Chinese citizens to do so. But yeah, there you are. In terms of some forthcoming events, on Thursday this week, you got the European Union's high-level group on internet governance, or European Commission's, or I should say, high-level group on internet governance is taking place Thursday morning, European time. I've got a link to join, but haven't yet seen the agenda, which is unusual because they normally send that out a week or so in advance. So I've either missed it or it's coming out slightly later than normal this time round, but is usually well worth attending for half a day, and most of the member states are usually there, plus a whole bunch of other interested stakeholders. I've mentioned the IGF coming up at the end of the month, and then that's pretty much it until the new year. We've got a bunch of other events in the first quarter or so, which so more of those in due course. But oh, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Going the wrong way. It's worth noting that there are calls for papers for various events coming up, of which I've got a number of those on this slide. I'll be adding to that shortly. So as you'd expect with events coming up in the new year, there's quite a few calls for papers accordingly. And then finally, in terms of future calls, next week, Dan Sexton, CTO of the Internet Watch Foundation, will be joining us to talk about privacy preserving web filtering, a topic which he hosted a side meeting at the last IETF meeting. So he's going to be reprising a bit of that and then just bringing us up to date with his thinking based on the discussion in the side meeting. But I think it'll be well worth doing. I won't guarantee that Peter will be doing a festive focus on Rule 53, given what you just heard at the start of this call, but we will do an update on Rule 53 at some point in or around the end of this year, one side or the other, and potentially also on filtering, Peter. I think we ought to take you up on your kind offer of also maybe sort of doing that as well. You won't be surprised to know we won't be doing calls on the 26th of December or the 2nd of January. So sorry to disappoint, but there you are. And I don't know why it's called Rule 53 in response to Kurt's question in the chat. I'll let Peter answer if he wishes. If there is a reason, there may or may not be.
There is a reason. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Rule 34. Okay, so maybe it's a bit more obscure than I thought. Rule 34 is, if you can think of it, there is porn of it on the internet somewhere. There's a thing, rules of the internet, and Rule 34 is this thing that's like, yeah. So this was a play on that, which is, if you can think of it, then someone's done it in the DNS. And I called it Rule 53 because of port 53, and it's a fairly obscure, I guess.
Well, you heard it here first, everyone. What a great question. And I wouldn't advise you to look up Rule 34 on your computer.
Yeah. I didn't come up with it, so I just...
Who knew? Thank you for that, Peter. That's not the answer I would have anticipated, but there you go. Well, that definitely brings us on to any other business. So let me stop sharing as we're just coming up to time. Does anyone else have anything anything else that you wish to raise in the last 60 seconds or thereabouts of the call? So now's a chance to do so, either by popping it in the chat or just raising your hand and just talking, whichever is easiest for you. Give you a chance to do so if you wish. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, and no one's got their hands raised. In which case, we'll wrap up there. We'll leave Andreas to go and invest in some new speakers for his computer, so he can hear the music in the true fidelity with which it's being delivered before we start the regular call. So hopefully I'll have them fully upgraded by next week, so he can tell us that they're now working properly. Other than that, though, have a fantastic week, everyone, and we'll catch up same time next week. Thanks all. Have a brilliant week.
Have a nice week. Bye.